In this video, we are going to look at the 34 parts of the step function. So the basic idea of this part is to check whether the buy-sell house's mechanism is intact or not. If it is intact, then the deal can be done. If it is not, the deal will break. There will be no deal. So how do we do it? First, we will examine the buyer's made offer on. As a matter of fact, I think we are dealing with owner context at the moment. Let's just check it first. Follow, is that follow pattern? What's it follow about? Follow chain, that's right. So here's the follow chain. Okay, the first link is a buyer. Okay, and also we actually should look at its background, its upper level situation. So the context is buyers, and the self is also buyers. So buyers are owners, self is buyer, so it's also owner. So we are in owner context. We are in the buyer's context. Okay. So we're under the buyer's context, and first step is to check the buyer's property called made offer on. It refers to a house. So if the buyer's offer to the house is not actually a house, meaning what? Meaning the buyer is not buying anything. Therefore, of course, there's no deal. So the chain is broken. We report false. But given the buyer offered a price on a real house, then we can set my owner of the house. The house object has a property called my owner. We can set my owner to be the seller, right? The seller is a variable, refers to my owner. The house is the house the buyer made offer to want to buy this house. And this house has its own owner. And this house, my owner, must be the seller, of course. Only the owner can sell the house to the buyer. So this owner is the seller. That's fine. That's okay. And then if the seller is not an owner, meaning what? Meaning, okay, we do have a house, but the house does not have an owner. The house is empty, the house is vacant. So, no seller to sell it, but this house is on sale, and there's a buyer willing to buy it. Of course, there is a deal. Okay, it's ready to sell. No need to negotiate with the seller, just miss the price and the deal is done. So we get the house right away. We report true. The chain is intact. Right. So now, how about if the seller is an owner? There is a seller for the house to be sold. For the house has been offered and has been given an offer. If that's the case, and if the buyer and the seller is the same person, okay, if they are the same person, same household, then the chain, the flow is intact. Okay, sounds good. But it's also confusing. Buyer want to buy a house, and that house owner is the seller. But we say the buyer is the seller, the person who want to buy his own house. That's just confusing. But we don't need to be, because the following line solves the problem, solves the puzzle. The following line of the code says, let's assume the buyer is not the seller. They are not the same person and not the same household. Now, we will focus on the seller and apply the follow chain function under this seller's context, meaning we are actually trying to find the house where this old seller wants to buy, okay? Because now we apply the same function to the seller, so we actually come back to the first line. So now this buyer becomes the seller. The seller make an offer to a house, okay? So the seller want to buy a house. And this house has its own owner. And this own owner is also called a seller. Well, let's call it a new seller, all right? So we ask, if this new seller is not an owner, then that's easy. But what if the new seller is an owner? We need to check whether the buyer equals to the seller, all right? But remember, this buyer is let's come back to the code. That will be much easier to talk about. So in the code is right here. We shouldn't do this. Okay. So this is the last line. Because we have this first link right here. And the first link, we actually saying if the buyer, which is the first link, the original, the same very early buyer, is the new seller. The new seller is the old seller want to buy the house from. And if the new seller is the original buyer, which means the old seller wanted to buy the house from the buyer. And at the same time, the buyer wants to buy the house from the old seller too, right? Because it is the first link under the first link context, the first link looking for a house, and this house has an owner which is called a seller, which is the old seller. So this first link, this buyer, this original buyer wanted to buy a house from the old seller, and old seller wanted to buy a house from the new seller. The new seller, if it is the first buyer, then they have a deal because they just switch houses. So the flow, the chain is intact. That's why this sentence makes sense. This sentence only makes sense when this line is executed, okay? It cannot be done in the first line normally.